Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. Agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje is here with us today on this Tuesday. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Nice to be with you here for our long edition live stream of weather across the country. We'll continue with the thoughts on summertime and lay out the fall outlook and hit a couple of headlines on what are so far relatively good looking corn and soybean fields. Some work to do in those livestock areas of the plains, especially some central plains areas. And we'll talk about the western states as well, with probably more rain out there. And we'll see in some upper Midwestern parts of the Corn Belt going forward here in the next few weeks to come.
I know you've been hinting at it might be a little more cooler than normal, and that might impact harvest and crops. So we do want to, of course, dig into that a little bit as well. And I think there's all kinds of still warm temperatures out there, but there seems to also be some moderating as well up in the Midwest here anyway this week. So
that's right. When I am doing local radio and we do spots for back to school sales and all that, I am first to remind people there's lots of summertime still to go.
Very good. I want to remind people, if anyone has any questions, we do have Greg here live, so be sure to post those there in the chat on your screen. If you're joining us from social media, you can certainly post those directly in your social feed. So, Greg, let's go ahead and get your slides up and let you go through that.
Okay, yeah, we'll kind of break it down, much like we do when we get together on other Tuesdays and Fridays. We update the shorter and medium range and kind of headline what we'll talk about this week in agribusiness. We'll have lately premiered these seasonal outlooks right here online, social media wise and digitally. So nice to be able to do that here on a regular basis. But off and running we go, and onto the weather maps and charts. And there's a visible satellite picture. And again, kind of lay the groundwork before we get into the medium and longer range. We'll try to move through some of the uneventful areas of weather in the country. But in any event, you can see a system through the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley, that circulation down across the northeastern Gulf. That is Tropical Storm Bertha. Yeah, we can still get these things to cook up even in an El Nino wind shear driven atmosphere. And that wind shear alone should help to put the kibosh on anything of concern, although that system will bring some welcome rain and relief over some of these heat wave weather areas of the deep south and southeastern states. Matter of fact, flood washes up as far north as the I-70 corridor into areas of the Buckeye State. And you can see the afternoon clouds building across the western states, scattered showers and thunderstorms getting going there. That will be probably an area of the country that sees more rain than really anywhere in the upper Midwest to speak of here in the coming days and weeks. The jet stream pattern showing a nice snappy trough. It's that U-shaped configuration and the red outlines through the Great Lakes down to the Ohio Valley. That is cooler, drier air. And it's also the same trajectory, but the air, if you will, is sinking, not rising, as kind of works in reverse order here when we have all that atmospheric dust and smoke on a multitude of fires across the Pacific Northwest now, Washington State and Oregon, riding into the northern Rockies, those jet stream winds, and then out of the upper Midwest, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, through the southern Canadian prairie, the boreal forest regions of Canada as well. So we're not done with dealing with that smoke issue, despite a nice welcome relief in the air mass expected to make its way across about the northeastern quarter of the country. There's low pressure spinning its way through Michigan. Weather pressure lines are freshening up out of the northwest. Across the northwestern Corn Belt, delivering much cooler, more importantly, drier air. And it's been all or nothing in the rains that came on through. I was looking quickly here at some of the rainfall totals that came out of Des Moines and Ankeny and around that Farm Progress show site at Boone. Some folks had as much as a half a foot of rain the past 36 to 48 hours out there. Maybe not necessarily at Ames or Boone, but some pretty welcome rains to help those crops along out there at the Farm Progress show site at Boone, Iowa, coming up the 1st to the 3rd, I believe, of September this year. The radar, you can ignore those blotchy blue areas, a little feedback on the radar and the satellite, but most of the organized showers and thunderstorms are already cranking away into the mid-Atlantic region, Ohio Valley, where there'll be severe weather this afternoon and evening time. There's Bertha, second name system of the season. And again, pretty well identified, a nice circulation, very photogenic, but winds are already shearing some of the northern extent of that system into the eastern states and the southeast. And so it'll be probably less significant rain system for those folks. And that system will actually track up around that big upper high that's been rotating like this. The top part of the high brought the smoke in. The bottom high part of the high moves weather from east to west. And so that'll be the story from the Gulf Coast in through the Louisiana, Delta region, and Texas over the next several days. Scattered showers, thunderstorms getting going in the daytime heating effect of the Pacific West and Southwest. Again, there'll be more rain out there, and we go this time of the year from the lightning and the fire potential still in the Pacific Northwest to downpour producing showers and thunderstorms and flash flooding over parts of the Intermountain West and southwestern parts of the country. Those haboobs or dust storms as well that will flock into areas of the Southwest at times. Then a couple of showers and thunderstorms across the Buckeye State. That will be the meat and potatoes, the northern and eastern flank of the rains that move through the Corn Belt. In any event, the heat is still holding on. The I-70 corridor on southward with readings between 90 and 95 there. They're close to 100 around Memphis this afternoon, feeling like about 110 down there. So there's the worst of it for those poultry operations. Scattered showers and thunderstorms again spreading out of the Corn Belt, cooler, drier air moving on in. These numbers are kind of, nice. 67% of the U.S. corn fields and 66% of the soybean fields are good to excellent. I think we've reached our plateau there. It would be surprised. I think it's 60% good to excellent in Illinois. I think that we're going to plateau there and maybe begin to move back in the other direction, numbers-wise. At least that's my personal opinion on it. Cooler weather across the Dakotas, Montana. 1/5 of Montana's spring wheat, forget about it. That's coming off that 102-degree heat that helped to increase the fires across that particular part of the country, as well as east across the Dakotas and Minnesota. And the hot weather across the southern parts of the region was stressing livestock, as well as rangeland and pasture lands. Topsoil moisture in the 10 states compromising the west and the southern plains is pretty anemic, as much as 93% short and very short across Colorado. There is the drought monitor, by the way, across that particular part of the country from last week. And you can see the worst of it still centered across Nebraska, bits and pieces across the Dakotas, and more so in through Colorado, as well as Wyoming, and down across the areas west of Oklahoma City, Texas Panhandle, and Oklahoma Panhandle country. The worst of it on its southern extension as well. And parts of the northern Delta, really nothing to write home about their soil moisture levels in any event. Tropical storm Bertha is again mentioned about 100 miles to the southwest of Panama City, track to the west, not north or east, to the west, to continue on here for the next couple of days. And the showers and thunderstorms again are welling up this afternoon across the immediate central and eastern Gulf Coast areas. As mentioned, plenty of stress across the Delta, Cotton Belt country, east of the Carolinas this afternoon, with high temperatures there expected to be up around 95 to 100 degrees. And of course, dry grounds beget a dry weather pattern. And this is the end result of what we've seen so far. Although there's been some recent rains, still a whirl of heat across and heat too, across the Virginias into the Carolinas as well. We've had some improvement through Georgia and more so over the central and western end of Cotton Belt country. Florida's had a pretty anemic and disappointing rainy season down there. Another trip off and trademark of El Nino. They get more significant wet weather systems there in the cooler seasons of fall and winter versus the usual showers and thunderstorms off the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast as well. There's a quick little snapshot of the rest of the open waters of the Atlantic. Nothing much going on. There's Bertha, as mentioned, outside of Panama City, and the track again, as mentioned, to the west and slightly north of west. So areas like Galveston, Houston, up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And yeah, sometimes it's these tropical systems that make a significant summertime improvement to pasture lands and rangelands when they make their way out of the Gulf this time of the year, as long as they are not the robust, Cat 2, 3, 4, and 5, as they will have come ashore across Gulf Coast areas. But again, I think those storms would be few and far between in the Atlantic basin this year. Wouldn't be surprised that parts of California, the Southern California areas, southwestern states get some semblance of a tropical system off the Pacific later on this season. So the dry base thunderstorms, lightning, 2 drops of rain, and you're off to the races with fires. That's the story of the Pacific Northwest. 24 fires already underway through Oregon and Washington. So we got that. Fires in Idaho, parts of Montana, the Dakotas, Minnesota. It's just going to be a world of smoke-related issues at times, and a lot of work to go. And usually northern parts of the U.S., northern climates, tend to stay drier and warmer as you get deeper into the fall and upcoming winter season. So from this vantage point, 6 months out, there's not a lot of optimism about getting recurring substantial winter precipitation going there. could stand to be corrected, but that's the current thinking here in this particular weather office. The circulation, the monsoon circulation on the backside of that high over the middle part of the country, the clockwise flow even up at 25,000 feet brings Pacific and Gulf moisture in, put the daytime heating, and you're off. And there's no real steering currents in that area from the high plains on westward through the divide and up to the Sierra. So those things that sit there and rain themselves out. That is Fausto, Fausto. We're already on F in the Pacific Basin. And with time, even with the colder, what we call California current, it runs from Alaska down the west coast all the way to Baja. If you've ever stuck your big toe out there off of San Diego or Los Angeles or San Francisco, yeah, that's cold water. It's just like the Great Lakes areas. But with time, I think there'll be more of a northward track on some of these tropical features, at least their moisture remnants into parts of Southern California and the Southwest going forward. Quickly here, over the next several days, you can see the reds across Pennsylvania, mid-Atlantic region, a moderate risk of severe weather out there this afternoon. Showers, thunderstorms get going over the southwestern parts of the country. 2 more real, honest to goodness cold fronts on the move across the middle part of the country, taking a significant edge off the heat and humidity. But other than a little upslope into areas of South Dakota and Nebraska tomorrow morning, some shower activity there. Rest of the middle part of the country is dry. You can see how the showers, thunderstorms wind down over the southwest, and they fire right back up again tomorrow afternoon. High plains and maybe the divide, and they'll shift from the high plains to the divide to the Sierra, then go back the other way, just back and forth here. But incrementally over about a week to 10-day time frame. So that's the story in the west as the showers and thunderstorms flare up over the east and southeastern part of the country. Maybe some rainfall in some of those pasture lands areas west of the Missouri for tomorrow afternoon. High pressure, light wind, a beautiful spell of weather for outdoor work, maybe some spray application with light winds across the Corn Belt. That's the severe weather this afternoon. That's a moderate risk over a wide area, the nation's capital to Cincinnati up to Pittsburgh and back to areas of New Jersey. Everyone else in relatively quiet order. The next 2 days, the organized rains are back west of the Missouri, generally focused either side of the divide. All or nothing, from 2 drops of rain to 3 inches of rain, all in a half-hour time sometimes in those western areas. That's how you come up with those really flash flood scenarios. And at least it's drier in central and south Texas. South of Uvalde, we've had about 25 to 30 inches of rain dating back to late last week. So we've got problems there in central and south Texas, not to forget about those folks as well. And again, rains for the far southeastern and eastern Corn Belt areas. That's the fire potential for the next 2 days, Northern California, Washington State into Oregon. The next 5 days on the upper area charts go like this. It's kind of a zonal west to east. You can basically see the hot high that week over the past few weeks has been over the Corn Belt, central areas, or the Central Plains, or into areas of the Western Ohio Valley, finally taking on a more textbook classic summer setup somewhere in the central and southern high plains to the divide to maybe in the desert southwest. Systems come over the top, as we call it. And so you get those ring of fire thunderstorm outbreaks when they do materialize. They tend to be all or nothing, sometimes derecho driven, but you can get the trajectory in those green lines. If there's fires in the Pacific Northwest, sections of Canada, the upper Midwest, Western Great Lakes region, sure enough, from time to time, we're still going to continue with these air quality issues across the eastern half of the country. No real big headlines, a myriad of little boundaries, and they're all inconsequential because thunderstorms tend to drive the smaller scale features, the bigger weather scales going forward. In any event, it's basically a seasonal weather pattern as it applies to the heartland, the heat across the southern plains and the desert southwest, usual afternoon showers and thunderstorms as well in that particular part of the country. So Bertha continues westbound on the highlights looking ahead here. Again, heavy rain, some gusty winds, a moderate storm surge. And if it's the worst as it gets in that part of the Gulf, don't think it will, but if it's as worse as we get in the short term, good news for those folks. A strong cold front making shower and thunderstorm headlines in the eastern part of the country. Monsoon setup, showers, thunderstorms, southwest, hot, dry weather into next week, central and southern plains, and kind of a seasonal go of it on temperatures over the western Corn Belt, bit cool east. And not a lot of any organized widespread rains. The next 7 days, this is primarily the stuff that goes through the next 2 or 3 days out of the western and southwestern Corn Belt, central and southern plains, welcome moisture either side of the divide, desert southwest as well. And most of this comes down in 2 stages, first with the cold front and then with the northern extent of Bertha's tropical moisture swing on northward. But otherwise, the more significant rains making their way across Bayou country into the Big Bend areas of eastern Texas. And there are the headlines lines. This might be a little overdone, I think, on some of the heavy rainfall prospects in the west and southwestern Corn Belt areas, but that certainly makes sense. This is a government-generated thing over the southeastern part of the country, but it does highlight and headline that we're not done with heat, and we are moving into a drier weather picture and pattern as it applies to spring grains and the corn and bean complex. High temperatures for the day today, you can see the cooling on the move into the upper Midwest. That is a mix of daytime readings this afternoon, the upper 70s and 80s, still low to mid 90s, and in south the I-70 corridor, triple-digit readings into the southern plains, lower Mississippi Valley Delta region. Look at the relief for the day tomorrow into the 70s and lower 80s for the middle part of the country. The heat across two areas, the southern plains, eastern parts of the mid-Atlantic region, really the Piedmont as we call it. And look at the heat in the Pacific Northwest, topping to 100 to 105 east of the Willamette Valley, Rogue River Basin, and the Cascades. So some of those drier areas as well. And the lightning-based thunderstorms, there's going to be some problems out there with fire potential. Thursday, pretty comfortable still, upper 70s and 80s. No real heat until we get going into the end part of the week, into the parts of Montana, the Dakotas, spring grains. Again, a lot of those are still winding their way through grain fill stage. So makes sense that quality issue continues to mount across the northern plains and upper Midwest. And look at the heat again, juxtapositioning in an El Nino odd setup. I've seen it written in that way, where the heat is north, temperatures are more tempered south, and so it goes. So we reestablish this right now moderate El Nino setup, and that's the Saturday outlook on temperatures across Montana, the northern plains, upper Midwest. The heat kind of builds in from northwest to southeast on a compressional warming basis, not a big south wind. And so we're still pushing back to 90 across parts of the Midwest, southern Great Lakes region, 95 to 98 in some of the north and northwestern Corn Belt areas, and some of the worst drought-ridden areas, and some slight reduction on temperatures into Monday of next week, but not by much. There's the drought monitor when we got together in May. There's the drought monitor when we get together here. Well, at least that was late last week's drought monitor. And so if we can kind of go back and forth here, we've seen two areas of improvement down south of the Ohio, much of the Corn Belt, and other areas that have seen some improvement, parts of the western Corn Belt areas and southeastern states. But again, still work to do in the eastern part of the country and across the plains and western states. Again, generally the northern half of the country tends to go milder to warmer and drier deeper into autumn. And so not real optimistic that some of these northern parts of the plains and spring grain areas and livestock country are going to get any real meaningful winter precipitation on a regular basis. That's the drought monitor across the Midwest from late last week. And that was the one out of reverse order here from June. That's June. And that was July. In any event, we'll just continue to press forward here the next 6 to 10 days. It makes sense just peddling out the government stuff from an upper perspective. Ridge over the southwestern part of the country. Jet stream winds in from the north and northwest. Smoke as well, debris out of the Pacific Northwest, Canadian prairie, points on southward, and any thunderstorms ride the crest, the northern and eastern flank, as we call it, ridge riding thunderstorms, where they tend to be hit or miss, fast moving, more pain and suffering than anything on meaningful rainfall. Next 6 to 10 days, that makes pretty good sense. I think the core of the heat over the western plains and points on westward, that makes complete sense as well. Over the southwestern part of the country, drying out over the middle part of the country, a little flattening of the ridge. There's still a trough in the Pacific Northwest, dry-based thunderstorms there, i.e. lightning, cool, delightful mid to late summer type weather for the northeast of New England. Over the top thunderstorms might favor parts of the western and Corn Belt. And again, more pain and suffering with severe than anything meaningful in the gauge. And so the beat goes on. General right idea, the real heat, if you will, is back west of the Mississippi, more so the Missouri, and the temperatures within a few degrees. And this is probably by the time we get into early August, average highs through the middle part of the Corn Belt, basically low to mid 80s, 85 to 90-ish. So we're back to at least going forward computing growing degree day units, because some of those readings at 95, 98, and warm overnight lows were just stressing out the corn and soybean fields and not giving them a chance to rest. And we couldn't get anything above that threshold of calculating base 60 growing degree day units is futile, because it just really, you're just calculating stress out there no matter how much soil moisture you have. This makes sense here from the feds over the next 8 to 14 days. That's the quick race through there. I hope it didn't go too fast, Sarah. So we'll get going here on what's left of July already. Yes, there's still lots of summertime to go. Don't panic about getting back into school. I think some of these athletic high schools and colleges, I think, are reporting in the next 10 to 15 days for their sports activities, I believe, correct?
I think that's usually the case. Exactly, Greg. And I just want to jump in here and remind everybody, if they have any questions for you, to go ahead and post those.
Yes, please do. And here we go for the rest of July into August, and then we'll break down for you. We have the September, October, and November highlights here, and all driven by not gargantuan, not super duper, not super, but a moderate to strong El Nino. And those have been few and far between as they measure up in summertime. They're easy to forecast from a winter cold season standpoint. Most El Ninos are, whether it's a weak one or strong one. And so, I hear all these cool hipster doofus kind of labelings of El Nino, but nobody attaches weather to it. We will for you here. So, and we do on This Week in Agribusiness and radio across the country as well. So going forward here, for the last week of July into early August around here, we do have a couple of those significant cool air lobes. We don't think heat will be terribly long lasting. It'll tend to ebb and flow from right around seasonal norms to a little above. But that variance corridor runs through the Mississippi Valley and slightly west. There should be a pronounced slowdown, a growing degree of units over the far northern and eastern Corn Belt. The heat is situated from the Black Hills to Big Sky Country down to Salt Lake City, back into the northwestern and western end of livestock country. A tendency to keep temperatures below, maybe that's below 100 degrees, but it's a start. And dew points up around 60, which is pretty moist air for the desert Southwest. And so the story would be there after this particular layout in this moderate El Nino setup. Two features that will bear watching. I think there'll be headlines being made as we get deeper on into August with tropical remnant features. One or two, I'm sure, are going to make their way out of Baja into Arizona, New Mexico, or even far Southern California. They happen every 5 to 8 years in Southern California, some remnant circulation from a named tropical feature. And so that's something to keep an eye out for going forward, late July, early August. A couple of more things and we can testify to this, it's like bathwater in the Gulf of Mexico. And a tendency for a little more action, a little more bullish on the rain. That's the only real significant adjustment, to adding a little more rain into the northern and eastern Corn Belt areas going forward into early August. The rest of August, we just continue back and forth. No long-lasting tough heat. I think we're over and done with that. It's short-lived on a given day. A general tendency for readings to be a bit below average over the northern plains, much of the Corn Belt, northern areas, and points out of the east, a hot ridge, if you will, still holding on in its usual textbook stuff. Western Kansas, Oklahoma Panhandle, west to about Salt Lake City, maybe down to about areas of central New Mexico, and that's about it. And we're still, and we are, by the way, officially into a moderate El Nino setup. And it is a drier trend. Despite this kind of up air configuration, there's no real meaningful opportunity to get meaningful rains going, except for the far eastern Corn Belt, the back end of something that will be positive, I would think. So if you want it for a better areas of corn and soybeans, it's probably going to be parts of Ohio and Michigan, worsening Wisconsin, Illinois, and of course, we're still dealing with dryness and drought in the western Corn Belt, and already beginning to get some drier patches show up to southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. We can certainly testify to that, but a very active weather pattern in through Old Mexico, the Rio Grande, and the southwestern part of the country. We're not really brewing up much in the way of a couple of weak western Gulf tropical systems. There'll be more action in the Pacific. Yeah, we may get something going in the Atlantic, but it would be relatively short-lived. That southwest wind flow up aloft is going to shear off the tops of those thunderstorms, and that's the best we can do for you there on getting any tropical action going in the Atlantic. So Sarah, that's the rest of summertime here in the minutes we have together. We'll try to get a little more time to the fall outlook going forward. This is sort of our rough draft number one.
Number one. Gotta love that, Greg.
But we have, but as people ask me, what's your confidence level in putting forecasts together and all that? And I've been doing this for long enough to say I wouldn't put the forecast out if I didn't have confidence in it. So there you go.
You'll say that when you get to number 10, right?
Yeah.
Say the same thing.
Exactly.
All right.
So here we go.
Get at it.
Here we go into the September highlights here. I got to pick a better color palette because my already prepared icons for Frost and Freeze are in this color scheme, and I don't claim to be the best PowerPoint, Photoshop, and weather graphics guy on the planet. Better with pen and paper in hand. Maybe I ought to take the old Tim Russert approach when he was the host of Meet the Press. He would just take the clipboard out and scribble stuff on it. Maybe we'll do that a few times over. Anyway, yeah, you're looking at that right. In this moderate to transitioning to strong El Nino, kind of going back from what we have put together and how we put together forecasts around here. And it's not all rip and read. I know of other brand X weather operations that just take X number of models out there. It's like a pitcher that has an arsenal of 6 different pitches, but can get none of them over the plate. That's kind of the approach I keep hearing, that we can tell you that it's a super gargantuan, historic, haven't seen it forever and ever El Nino, but you're not putting any weather with it. What's the forecast then? So this is our forecast. We think this is going to be a frost and freeze, and it kind of lines up right now that I wouldn't be surprised. We've got some scare first around Labor Day in the northern areas of the Corn Belt, and probably sometime that runs a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the normal frost date. So that's the back end. That's the second half of September. Some crops will be made. Others may not be out of their black layer stage on the corn side of things. And so it goes. There's some, I think, early season cold concerns, frost and freeze, and what we foresee in a strong El Nino setup. The heat ridge fragments into the Pacific Northwest. We've got cooler than average weather over the southwestern sections of the country. So with that particular scenario in mind, we move forward to precipitation, which, if you make it through okay, soil moisture wise, and you've had good stands and you're not dealing with severe weather, that's about the only way you're going to generate organized rainfall, then it ought to be a pretty quick and movement into dry down, moisture reduction, and maybe even early harvest as we get deeper on into September in these western Corn Belt areas. There's no headlines to be made other than more fire potential, more smoke potential going on, and not much drought relief in the northern plains and the northern Rockies. It is a wetter weather pattern across much of the southern states. One thing I wasn't able to squeeze in there is probably a tropical system into Baja and the desert Southwest, and maybe another one taking a run towards Padre Island and the Texas Gulf Coast area. So that's the thinking here. We'll kind of toggle back here briefly. That's the thinking. That's probably a Labor Day, northern Great Lakes freeze frost potential, and maybe down to about Madison on the frost side, but more likely the late second week into the third to the beginning part of the 4th week of September. Good 2 to 3 weeks ahead of schedule over the rest of the Corn Belt areas. That's the precip we just took a look at. Temperatures in October, we're still going to be oscillating back and forth, and I know you get your first frost and freeze in October. The fact is that it may occur early in areas in the southern Corn Belt, and a significant freeze earlier than normal. When the freeze dates, let's say if we were to pick somewhere in northern Illinois, it's like the 12th to 18th of October, somewhere the first frost freeze in there. And so we will have seen maybe a frost already and a freeze that may materialize somewhere in the back half of October, very much ahead of schedule. So that in mind, keep that going forward, I suspect, from a management of temperatures and crop, at least development, at least harvest development, if you take into September and October, much above for now in the southwestern part of the country. There's not a lot going on in the moisture department. Again, if you can make it through the nonsense of the cold, then it should be a pretty, and things are going to be okay from a stand standpoint. It'll be pretty much quick and often, early and often, on harvest across a good part of the western Corn Belt areas in particular, and where things have made it through the cold okay in the winding down to growing degree day units. Not a lot going on in the moisture department either in the spring grain areas, Canadian Prairie, much of the Corn Belt. Trademark of El Nino, again, maybe a couple of tropical systems in the southwest. No headlines in the Atlantic to be made, we think, over even October. Not ruling out that we can't get a storm or two, but greatly reduced numbers anticipated. I'm not sure what the folks at Colorado State are put out. I think the Weather Service is already backpedaling on their thinking for the tropical season in the Atlantic already. Going forward here, I keep clicking and grabbing the wrong mouse for some reason. Here we go on the November highlights here, and we start to move into a kind of a more classic textbook El Nino setup. With the cold early in the season, temperatures while the seasonal norms come down, the actual highs will kind of build up a little bit. So we got a pretty mild November in store, I think. Not that we won't get a couple of cracks of cold here in the middle part of the country, but pretty balmy, pretty mild, and even some late season warmth holding on in the Plain States area. So that is a good thing with outdoor work and livestock operations and feed and supplies and all that. There's a little more northward jog on some of this El Nino driven moisture in through November across the Pacific West. Good news. The West continues to recharge nicely in the southwestern part of the country. Parts of the cattle country, pasture lands, winter wheat, after having been newly sown a few weeks, a couple of months before, maybe this moisture or rain before they go into dormancy will be of significance and help that out as well. And the southeastern states as well, southern states into a wet weather cycle as we head through or two for the month of November. So that's it here, Sarah. That's all I got for you. The longer range thinking for the month. And the months of autumn around here, I think there are bouts of early season cold, a winding down, a slowing degree of growing degree day units and slowing degree day units too, for that matter, and kind of hitting the brake pedals on significant moisture as well after the 6 inches of rain around the Farm Progress Show site at Ankeny and Boone and all that. So it looks good for farm progress from a lack of rainfall standpoint, maybe not so good with crop maturity, maybe looking good for some on an early and often harvest, and we'll continue to move into the strengthening El Nino. And if it goes like it ought to go around here for El Nino across the mid latitudes, not a lot of moisture. What moisture comes through is liquid form, and relative to temperatures going down in the seasonal norms, they'll actually, in reality, be pretty mild with, unusual 40s, 50s, and 60s into parts of the middle parts of the country, the way we see it around here. So that's what we attach to a strong El Nino. That's the actual sensible weather that we think we're putting together. Those other elements that we're looking at in the North Atlantic, the stratosphere, up around the polar region into the northern Pacific as well. So this is largely about a 40 or 50% El Nino driven. The rest of them, other methodologies that we picked up in the Finkel rule of thumb as well in the weather office going forward here over the next 4 to 6 months.
What about the smoke, Greg? The smoke from the fires, is that going to impact the crops or the growing season at all? Do you think it's been that significant from an overall standpoint, or maybe
I was jotting down notes, can't find the notes now, but that was something I thought about yesterday. The insulation, I think the sun's rays, the ability to get insulation in there. And I think we had that a few years ago where some folks, someone had done a study and they really pinpointed Michigan as being a spot where the crops really took a slower maturation rate and we're behind because of that. That is an excellent question to bring up, and an excellent bullet point to just kind of keep in the back of our minds, because it is such a broad and far reaching. It's not just a little campfire somewhere in Wisconsin. It's over from the Pacific Northwest, Canadian boreal forest areas from the tree line down out in the Canadian Rockies, parts of the southern prairie provinces, and we throw northern Minnesota into it as well. I mean, this will ebb and flow, but I think it'll be just that. We are not going to be done with this until we can get a broad-based weather pattern going in the Northwest or the Canadian prairie or upper Midwest. But again, a trademark of El Ninos, it's reversed. Wetter south, warmer, drier north. So this is something that will be probably on the back of our minds and maybe in the back of the headline page going forward, coming out from time to time here in the months to come. And
different crops are probably affected differently. So
there's
that at play as well.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the plant physiology and all that, just enough to get me in trouble. And so, but yeah, I would think that would be an impact to keep an eye out for going forward if this becomes more and more of a recurring basis here for the balance of the growing season across the Corn Belt.
Very good. Well, of course, we'll keep you up to date. Greg and I will get together every twice a week, and then of course every weekend on This
Seems
Week
like
in
a lot
Agribusiness.
more though, doesn't it?
I know, right? No. This Week in Agribusiness, Greg's on every weekend with an extensive forecast as well, and a number of different radio stations and TV stations. You can find Greg everywhere. So, lots of opportunity to keep updated. Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate it. We are tuning in today as well.